Hello, hi. I'm Dr. Gurung. I'm a consultant psychiatrist. I currently work in UK. I've been practicing psychiatry for almost 14 years running in UK. One of my interests is I love reading books. So currently I'm reading a book called The One. Right now I'm in page 50. This book is a total of 225. So hopefully in the next 7 or 8 days, I'm going to finish this book. The reason why I'm making this video is, I also love to watch podcasts, listen to podcasts. And yesterday, I was listening to a podcast on communication, and I felt it's relevant for me to make this video because as a consultant psychiatrist, my interest is also teaching. I teach a lot of medical students. I'm also a clinical and education supervisor. And for the last 4 or 5 years, I've been involved in teaching, especially the psychiatrists who are preparing for MRCPsych, which is exam which deals a lot with the communication. So they are some of the things that which I've learned from that podcast, which I want to share my thoughts on it. So in the podcast, the thing which I really liked about was they try to break the communication, especially the verbal communications, into simple parts, so it becomes easy for people to follow. This is also one of the techniques that I always use in order to improve my communication skills. So let us just dive to the communication verbal video straight away. One of the things which I found very interesting in the video was the voice, the verbal that we use. It works with certain kind of frequency. As a human being or even as an animal, we used voice or sound to communicate with each other. So the thing which I found very interesting was, and when I analyze myself, since I've been practicing as a psychiatrist, I feel communication is very, very vital, and it's almost uh, like uh, the only key, the main skills as a psychiatrist we have. As a psychiatrist, we use investigation just to rule out the cause, but in order to get to the crux of it and in order to find the real analysis of the psychiatric problem, we use the communication skills. So keep in mind that the voice that we use is like an instrument, and I found quite interesting that the vocal tone that we use, uh, it's like it's like a greatest weapon that we have to communicate with each other. So let me just share some of the things which I've learned from communication, especially the verbal communication. So the verbal communication literally can be divided into five main parts. So let me just tell you the five parts. When I speak or any one of us speak, keep in mind that we have to notice the melody of our vocal tone or the sound. Okay. And I was a bit conscious, when I started working in the UK, I thought my accent was not up to the standard. And for almost like 2 or 3 years, I used to have a bit of doubt on my own accent. But later on, I realized that it's not the accent, it's more about pronunciations and articulations of the speech. For that, one of the techniques that I use is when I read a book, and if I find some word quite interesting, intriguing, what I tend to do is I tend to use my mobile, use Google, and try to practice the pronunciation and the accent. And I also try to practice that pronunciations through British English as well as through American English. So let me just show you an example of one of the word that recently I practiced. Okay, so let me just see. Okay, so the word is So this is how I
bourgeois, bourgeois,
bourgeois,
bourgeois,
bourgeois,
bourgeois.
bourgeois. Okay. So this is how I practice bourgeois. Let me just see the meaning of it. This was one of the interesting word that I've learned. And the meaning is belonging to a character of a middle class, typically with reference to the reserved materialistic value or conventional attitude. Okay? And keep in mind when we speak, English is not my first language. What I've noticed is Nepali is my first language, so my mouth and the tone and the vocal, my voice and the tongue, as well as my vocal cord, was trained in Nepali language. So I need to be mindful that the instrument of my vocal tone was set in the Nepali language. So when I speak English, I need to be cautious that I need to modulate my voice as well as be more conscious about the articulation. Okay, so let us now dive into the five things which are very vital for communication. So the five things are melody. So melody means when we speak, we need to learn the art of articulating or changing the tone, changing the frequency of the melody. For example, I'll give that if I speak in a very low tone, it doesn't make any sense at all. So let me just give you an example of melody. This is one of the things. Okay, so let us focus on the melody. When I focus on the melody, I'll just speak a sentence without a melody, and I'll also show you an example how it looks like with a melody. Okay, um, so this is without a melody. If you kill a killer, the number of the killers in the world still remains the same. Okay, so this is without a melody. Now, if I add a bit of melody, okay, it says if you kill a killer, the number of the killers in the world still remains the same. Okay, this is the quote from Batman. So you can see, if you change the melody of it, and keep in mind, what I've also realized is if I have to speak with any of like the people in um, utility or something, the voice seems to be more like a musical kind of thing, but we also need to be aware of how to not get into that trap of the musical tone. Okay, the second thing that in communication is also important is rate. Rate is like a pacing. I do a lot of running, so from my running experience, I can relate how the rate is. Rate is if you have to tell something which is very important for the person to know, then you have to slow it down. Okay, the rate also takes into account of pacing. Most of the people they don't feel comfortable with the pacing and they have to use feelers like okay. So we need to be cautious and we also need to feel comfortable with the rate. The third bit is volume. I say volume, okay, a number of studies have shown that people who use a low volume, um, people associate that with low confidence. So with a volume also, you need to be careful that depending on the crowd, you need to modulate your voice. Okay, so if I have to tell something important, especially in the class setting, I raise my voice. If I feel which is not important, I tend to lower it voice. So vocal tone, it acts like an highlighter if I'm reading a book. Some of the things that I need to make people aware, those I use the volume. Okay, so the volume is one of the techniques of how we can enhance our communication skills. Okay, now the third is emotions. In communication, emotions is very important because emotion colors the content of what we want to say. Let's take an example that if I have to tell something which is very sad, I bring up that from here. Okay, so when we speak, it doesn't just limit to over here. It also needs to come from here. Um, if I have to say something very thing that excites me, like for example, if I have to tell about reading books, I would say I love reading books. Books helps me to enhance the way I think and my mindset. Okay, so this is like the emotional back. Now the fifth element in terms of the verbal communication is the facial reactivity. Imagine the voice that we use also needs to reflect in the facial thing. And for a long time, I was a bit conscious that being an Asian, I thought that I didn't have much of the facial reactivity, but the more I practice, now it comes natural to me. For example, if I have to tell something which excites me a lot, then if I have to feel I'm happy, okay, the smile needs to be there, the eyes needs to lit up. These are some of the things. And now I've also realized that I play with a lot of my hand gestures as well as, body language is also very important in communication. So let me just recap. So the things that I've covered in communication, there are five things. When I use the vocal tone, number one is the melody, number two is the rate, number three is the volume, number four is the emotion, number five is the facial reactivity. And keep in mind that these are all the behavior changes, and with more practice, it helps you to enhance your body language. Some of the things that which I also found it very helpful is videotaping myself. So it gives me a sense of the things that I'm doing right and the things that I need to improve. uh, I was a bit conscious that in the past I used to use a lot of word like okay, and it felt like it was more like a validation that I was using. But since I do a lot of videotaping, I also tend to watch them on the next day. So it gives me a chance to modify, amend some of the things that I want to. Um, so okay, and and the thing which I've learned recently through my own videotaping is what I've realized is the hand gesture like this. It also has a significance. One of the significances in the past, in the prehistorical time, this was more of uh, communication skills to show to the other people that look, I don't have any weapons. I'm here to interact and have a chat with you. Okay, so this looks like an open gesture, but if you talk with like this, it seems like you're close. Um, in terms of your opinion, you are very close and you are not eager to turn. Okay, so we also need to make sure that our body language is also important and it needs to fit with it. And the cultural sensitivity is also important. We also need to be aware of the environment in which we are communicating. Okay, so these are all the things that you need to be aware in terms of communication. So, and the last bit which I want to leave in this video is a lot of my juniors, doctors, as well as a lot of the people that I have interaction. One of the main complaint they say is they find it very difficult to communicate with people. um, so in terms of in communicate, we also need to be aware that we need to have a lot of ideas. And recently, I've learned that due to the social media, a lot of the people feel very comfortable with chatting on social media. And the same person, if you meet them face to face, they find it very difficult to even have a conversation for like 2 or 3 minutes. So the technique that I normally use as a psychiatrist is, the curiosity, okay, the eagerness, and the thing which I've learned from my daughter is you still need to have that, humbleness as well as naivety of trying to know. Like for example, my 4 year and 7 years, they're very curious. They ask questions. Okay, so in terms of communication, those are also some of the skills that you need to enhance. And the last bit which I want to leave in communication is I'll just show an example that in terms of communication, storytelling is also very important. I'll give you an example. Like if I have to tell that if somebody asks me that how I met my wife, if I just say I went to Nepal, I saw her, went for a few dates, and that is how I met her. No people will be interested to know about my story. To enhance the story, I've learned that there are five things that you need to make the audience feel that story. Okay, so the five things is when you tell a story, you also need to make that people feel, see, hear, have a feel much. This is how, as a public speaker, you might be able to relate with that person. Okay, so for this, let me just give you an example of the skills that you use in the public speaking. Okay, so this is just a demo. Um, I met my wife, and it's a very interesting story. The way I met my wife was it was because of a sleeper. Okay, so you can see that over here I gave a bit of pause, and this is something called hook. So the audience might be more interested to listen what I have to say next. Okay, so then I would say that okay, um, it's interesting that it was around 2009 that I was working, and there was a big strike in Nepal. So all the buses were closed, and I was forced to walk. At the time, I was wearing a slipper. It was a very rainy, muddy day, and my slipper torn. I didn't have any option. All the shops were closed. So the only option that I had was I saw upstairs, there was a gym, and it must be my tricky mind that I just want to leave my slippers over there and borrow someone's slipper and run away. In Nepal, we have got this kind of traditional that when we go to the gym, we leave our shoes and slippers. We don't take it inside. But what happened was when I went over there, the gym instructor was looking at me, and he was making sure that I don't leave my broken slippers over there. So I found it very uncomfortable. I had 3,000 rupees in my pocket. So just to avoid this, I paid for the first class for my gym class, and I ran away with someone's shoes. Um, and since I've given my 3,000 pounds, I didn't have any options than to come to the gym. And this is where I saw my wife, and rest is history. We have been married for 15 years. Okay. So you can see the difference that uh, making the story and making it very personalized, it helps you to connect with people. Okay. So thank you very much. I think I've spoke a lot with communication. And what I'm going to do is I'm also going to watch my own video now. And this is also one of the ways that I try to improve my communication skills. Communication skills also can be enhanced by continuously having this inquisitive to learn something new, experiment with it, and never be afraid to try anything new, different things. Thank you very much.